Asaf Avidan, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Sean, thanks for having me.
So where are you right now? I like your setup right now. Looks good.
I'm in this kind of hybrid between a house and the studio in Italy, in the countryside of Italy. I bought this property and I re, I kind of reconstructed it from the ground up. It was like this old kind of farmhouse, and in the beginning, it was supposed to be just a recording studio, and then I just fell in love with the place, so I just stay here more and more. And now the guitar room is only the living room, and the drum room is only the kitchen.
Sounds awesome, man. I was just talking to my fiance yesterday about how we'd love to get back to Italy at some point. Love it there.
Where were you? Where were you here the last time?
He was years ago, early 20s. Went on the obligatory Euro trip. So I went
Mhm.
to Rome, went to Venice, went to Florence. But I'm always seeing just epic photos of some of the beaches in some of
Yeah.
the coastal areas in Italy. So that's what I got to do next. I feel like.
No, it's really incredible. I fell in love with this place super unexpectedly. It didn't really make sense for my career to move here, especially in the countryside. But it's just so gorgeous and so peaceful, and the people are so warm and nice that it was so different than everything I knew from back home from Israel. So it just appealed to me.
Yeah, yeah, no. Well, it looks like you got a nice little spot there. So really looking forward to talking to you about your career, because man, you've had some huge success. Platinum records and #1 hits in different countries. Bef- and I know you got a new album out as well, and you just dropped a new single at the end of September. So but before we talk about that, why don't you take us all the way back and just let us know, how'd you get into music? Were people in your family into music? Did you hear someone? Did you see someone that inspired you? Would you tell us about some of those first memories getting into music?
I mean, the story. Oh shit! Sorry. The story I tell myself about how I got into music or tell others is that it was because of a girl, right? Because a
Mm,
girl broke my heart into more
mhm,
pieces than it was made of. It was like
mhm,
a anomaly of biology and physics, and I didn't know that pain before,
mhm.
and it just spiraled me downwards into an ocean of uncertainty that I just couldn't deal with. And I left my job. I was an animator at the time. I studied film and then I studied animation, and that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to create films that translate my emotions. And so the minute that I had all this overwhelming emotion, my initial thought was, okay, I have to make, a short film out of this. But the process is so tedious and slow, the process of animation, classical animation,
Yeah.
that like you have this initial emotion and then you translate it to like a synopsis, and then you kind of build up and thicken up and add some meat to the story and the characters, and then you design the characters and the landscapes, and then you do the keyframes and the in-betweens, and it's just like, oh my god, this is going to take a year before I can get this off my chest.
Yeah.
And and so I needed something way more immediate. And I had this guitar. I don't even remember. I remember why I had it, because when I was years before, eons before, when I was a teenager, I was born in 1980. That means
Mhm.
when like the grunge scene happened, I was like 12 or 13, and I remember hearing Nirvana for the first time, and like I was a kid that didn't know anything about music, and then I discovered rock music at the time, at the specific age of anger and frustration
Mhm.
in teenage years. And so Metallica came to Israel for a performance in Tel Aviv, and I went to see them with my friends. I have no idea how my mom let me. I was 12 years old maybe, and she just let me go with two of other 12-year-old friends into a like Metallica concert that had maybe, I don't know, 70,000 people. And I remember coming back from that show, and like we said, fuck it, we have to have a band. That's it. That's what we're going to do. And
Yeah.
I came home and I told my mom, I need drums. I want to be Lars Ulrich. And
Mhm.
And she said, no, we live in a small house.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but I can get you a guitar, like an electric guitar with an amplifier, then you can practice with earphones. And
Yeah.
so she bought me that guitar. I had one lesson, put it away, never touched it again
Mm.
until maybe 15 years later or 13 years later when I was about 26. And that spiraling down happened, and I saw that guitar and I was like, so there wasn't YouTube at the time. There wasn't the internet wasn't as strong, but you could still figure out how to play some chords from the internet. And so I taught
Yeah.
myself some chords, and I knew about the 6 basic chords, and I just wrote an album, 6 songs called "Now That You're Leaving." It was an EP about this breakup. Of course, I was blaming her now that you're leaving.
Uh-huh.
As you do in those times, you need to take all that um, futility of effort and that fragility and that meaninglessness of it all, and you need to point it with anger towards somebody, which is ridiculous and stupid and unfair, and I don't know, it doesn't get you anywhere. But at the time, I had to have that in order to get it off and continue forward. And so I blamed her through shouting into a microphone, and that was the beginning of my career. And I'm
Wow.
I'm I'm super apologetic. I mean, I apologize a thousand times for presenting only my side of the story of that, but it did push me towards being a musician, and I fell in love with it ever since.
Yeah. And so you said you were, was that in your 20s that you picked the guitar up again and made that first
Yeah,
EP?
yeah, I was 26, so it's fairly late. Like,
Hmm.
I wasn't a teenage kid. I mean, I was for 2 seconds,
Hmm.
but really, I really just I have so for the record, I have Mickey Mouse tattooed on my ass. So it's a
Hmm.
small tattoo, but and like I got it when I was about 17, like because I knew that that's what I'm going to do. I want to be an animator. I want to create moving images,
Yeah.
and crazy how that changed. Like I don't miss it one bit.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. Well, you're still in, the creative area, but it's really interesting. It's something I've thought about before too, which is the length of a piece of art. You know what I mean? And you mentioned that music just kind of lent itself better to you because you had these emotions that you wanted to get out quickly. You're like, I don't want to be animating for a year just to get this one point across. You know what I mean? And I've thought about that myself too. Just how much shorter the process is to make a song compared to a film or a movie. And
There's also the presentation of it. So like with music, it's almost like a psychoanalysis that you hear yourself when you talk to your shrink or whatever. You hear yourself say these words, and then you can regurgitate them kind of, and there's a process being happening, and it's something physical. Like when I picked up that guitar and I started outletting my pain, literally, in the most literal sense. I just you open your mouth, this barrier of teeth, and you move your tongue, and the vocal cords get this, you have a passage of air going from your diaphragm, and your stomach muscles are pushing in, and like all your body is just squeezing out the pain, and then it reverberates through the room, and gets back to your ears, and then you compute it and calculate it, and you have some kind of catharsis with it. So it was really about that, the immediacy of the process of just hearing myself sing. And that's why very quickly, in the first instance, it was always about singer-songwriter. It was always about writing the songs, but also performing with them.
I
It
love
was,
that description. I love the description of the physical nature of music. You know what I mean? Because as an animator, I love animation also. I grew up watching cartoons. I used to love drawing, and but it's a very and writing can be this way too. But just like at a table or nowadays at a computer and just quietly drawing. Unless you're like Jackson Pollock, just like
yeah.
heaving like heat like buckets of paint at like a wall, which can be art. you know, that's one way to get physical with visual art, but music, you know, I love your description of just, you know, you're hearing yourself, you're breathing, you're sometimes you're performing live, you're sweating, you know, and it really is a physical act.
Yeah. And while we're talking about it, I think that, I'm going to get a bit dark and personal, but I remember when I mean, Israelis have mandatory military service. And so I served in the military, and pretty quickly I kind of lost my mind, and it got real dark. And I started having panic attacks years after. And, and I remember when I got a panic attack, I would start breathing heavily, and I would like understand my own mortality too much, and I couldn't bear it. And the only thing that got me out of it, thinking back on it now, is I don't know. I would just make a noise. I would just hear my own voice. I would be like, oh, or just fuck, or whatever. But
Hmm.
just okay, I'm in place. You hear yourself in the physical space of the present. And there's also that element of it. It's really super interesting when you dig deep down about how primal hearing your own voice or playing with your own voice in space. It's the me and the other existing together.
I love that. I love that. I'm gonna have to think more about that. So you write this first EP, you know, inspired by a breakup, and of course, you know, just like most music, you know, it was one-sided. It was your side of the story.
Yeah.
So how did you go from, you know, just deciding to put this first record out to, you know, to transitioning to the crazy success you have now? Did you after you kind of recorded that first album, were you kind of like, okay, I gotta, you know, did tell me a little bit about how you improved your production, maybe some of your networking, some of you know, how did you get more into the business to reach the point you're at now?
So my answer is always live music. That's the only thing to me that got me, got my chops up to the level that I needed them to be.
Mm,
Because the way I am is that without an audience, I'm a lazy fuck. I don't do anything. Like if I didn't have the idea that I will present these songs to people, and in the most voyeuristic sense, just show myself naked and put my intestines out in my hands and just say, love me, or see me or hate me or whatever, just feel something. And through your own interpretation, your prisms or whatever, there's that regurgitation thing again, that through you judging me or feeling something through me, I can feel myself and all these things that are happening. If that process wasn't on the table, I don't think I would have ever continued. So I had a friend that was a starting musician, but she was a singer songwriter as well in Jerusalem. And she was performing, like in bars in front of like 7 people. But to me, that was more than I had. And I went to see her concert one time, concert, like,
mhm,
this gig in the corner of the room. And I don't know, like all I could think of is, I wish she would invite me on the stage. I wish I would be there. Like it just felt from the from the start, it just felt that the stage is a more comfortable place for me than the audience. And once and then I just talked to the bar owner and I said, yeah, I got some songs. Do you mind if I try to play here? And he said, sure. And he gave me a date, and I had to write more songs because 6 songs is not enough for a show.
mhm.
And so I wrote, I don't know, like 10 songs in a month. And
Wow.
yeah, at the time it was super easy to write because everything was new and I was very unjudgmental about myself.
Mhm.
Um, and so I went to that bar, and there were like 3 people. 2 of them were my friends, and but that one person drinking the beer, and suddenly I opened my voice and I start the song, and I really remember that kind of look, like what, like that double take kind of thing that I still get. Like my singing voice is very different than my talking voice, and it's
Mhm.
very different than what people presume it would be when they see me. It's very high and drawly and I don't know, weird, I guess.
Right, right. Yeah, it's a unique sound, yeah.
so I remember how surprised he was and how that got his attention, and I just kept singing. And the next week I decided to try to do this every week, like every Friday or something. And then just more people came and they told their friends, and it just very, very quickly kind of avalanched from there into just having this weird buzz in Jerusalem at first, and then it seeped into other parts of Israel, Tel Aviv, and the bigger cities. And soon enough, I was being invited to Berlin and New York and Munich, and I don't know, and just things rolled very fast without me really sitting down and intending it to be anything, or deciding, or actually knowing what the fuck I was doing. I really, I was clueless. I didn't know anything about the music industry, anything about music. I didn't know how to read notes, or how songs are supposed to be written or sung or whatever. And only through the recognition of others, only when people clapped their hands and voted with their feet, came the next night and brought their friends, and I really started believing that this has some merit. And I don't know when the transition was, like what album, because I released already, I don't know, 7 albums. And I don't know, I don't even know if now I would consider myself a musician or an artist or whatever if it weren't for those people, if it wasn't for those people. And yeah, so I can't really tell you how I structured my career, except one foot at a time, one step. And things escalated, I hope, because I had that uniqueness that doesn't even have to be a good thing. It can be a peculiarity that just stands out.
Mm.
Um, and second, I hope, and this is my biggest hope, is that the songs are good enough that people feel through them. That's what an artist hopes for. You hope that it's not just luck, it's not just timing, it's not just whatever, which it is, but I hope it's not just that.
Yeah. When you during those first shows, it sounds like you saw your friend there, and it sounds like it was just kind of like a coffee shop situation.
Yeah.
It was is that, and so, which is nice for you because it seems like when you probably played there, you probably didn't have a lot of expectation, and maybe the person who's the owner or the manager didn't have much expectation either. He's like, sure, go ahead and play. But you said that there were more people coming, sounds like, specifically to see this guy with the unique voice, like, oh, check, you got to come check out this guy. uh were you filling that room a little bit more than it usually was filled? It sounds like you were,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I
yeah.
I love the idea that you were able to just start playing immediately with low expectations, but you exceeded those expectations at this kind of low pressure, in this low pressure room.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was, I mean, you're giving me a bit of goosebumps now. I didn't imagine I would get so emotional about it, but I don't think about that time a lot, like at all,
Mhm.
actually. And so going back to it now and thinking about that, broken-hearted kid, just kind of, I don't know, like scatting there, like jazzing it up, like had no idea what I'm doing, but just kind of pretending, or whatever. And suddenly, after 3 shows or 4 shows, people are already just packed outside the place. Um, it strikes me that that's peculiar now that I know a bit more about the music industry and everything. But at the time, it just seemed that that's what's happening. I guess, that was natural. Um, I remember growing up. I grew up as a diplomat's kid. Both my parents were diplomats, and we moved around from. And we lived in Jamaica for 4 years when I was really small. I was 7, and I remember I was a white Jewish kid in a Black Christian community, and I was the outsider. And then I went to an international school, and we had like people from every ethnic group that you can imagine, and every religion and every language. And that was just normal to me. The uniformity of cultures wasn't like Americans experience this more, the that fact that people are mixed together. But you go to some places in Europe or the East or whatever, and it's just kind of like this monoculture of humans. And I don't know, to me, going back to Israel, which even Israel is an immigrant country, so you have a lot of people, but in the neighborhoods in the 90s were still kind of segregated to distinct ethnic groups, and kind of like Little Italy or Chinatown or things like that.
Sure.
Um, and it just struck me. I remember coming back to Israel and finding it weird, just because when you grow up, when you grow into something, it just becomes the natural way of existence to you. And so also with the music, like the fact that it grew so quick and the fact that things happened as they did just seemed like that's the way it goes, like, yeah, okay, like, after 3 months of literally 3 months after picking up the guitar, somebody from Warner Brothers Germany came to Israel especially to see a show. It was like, it was crazy fast. And so yeah, so it just seemed like, okay, that's what I'm doing. And then everything was like a reaction to what was happening around. Okay, now I have to get to Germany to do a showcase. And then okay, that happened. And that, like, I just reacted pretty quickly. And I had luck that my older brother was just he was 30 at the time, and he worked in a record store for a long
Mm.
time, selling
Hmm.
CDs. And so he knew about music, not about the music industry, but he was very into music. And then he said, he helped me out just as my brother. And then I told him, listen, this is getting way out of hand. And he just started managing me. And
Mm.
that was and I formed this band called Asaf Avidan and the Mojos, which were a bunch of people that actually came to those first concerts and saw me. And I was like, do you want to have a band? Because I feel I need more thickness around these naked songs.
Hmm.
And maybe it was also about me being a bit of, I was a bit afraid to do all this alone. And I wanted to create this family that will go through this with me. And so we moved to Berlin for a bit, and we rented, it was this classic, really dumpy kind of, we lived in one apartment, like 6 or 7 people, sharing one toilet. And it was, whatever we needed to do in order to get this recording done or whatever. And then we went to New York for there was the Knitting Factory. It was the venue, the Knitting Factory, and they did this contest. I don't even remember what it was. And I was like, let's do that. And we just saved money from everything that we could. We still had day jobs. And we went to New York and went into this hostel with, 20 other people in the same, like, New York. So I woke up with like tons of bed bug bites, and
Oh no.
but like all the classic cliches of beginning of rock and rolldom. And but I guess those are like, I would never in a million years go back to that. But I guess it builds something in your understanding of what, like, I look at people who go to like X Factor or American Idol now, and I'm like, poor people. They really don't get to build. And it's not just about building themselves, it's building the base, building the fan base, building this whole thing that you slowly get into the process, kind of biologically.
Mm.
Um, but and I think it's important, and you learn as you go along. Like, if I had to do the performances I do now, uh, you know, 10 years ago when I was like still green, it would be first of all, I would suck, and second, and second, it would be challenging emotionally. I feel you build an emotional capacity or armor to deal with these things. And yeah, so I'm thankful that I had the process that was fast, but it was gradual.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds really organic, but also very natural, which I think a lot of times people, like, if they were to make a movie about that first, those first few shows, I think it would be like, oh, that's just Hollywood,
Yeah,
expediting the
exactly.
story. But it sounds like it really did pick up steam really quick, which is really amazing. And it sounds like you had a brother who had some savvy, probably, to start booking you in other places to help cultivate that momentum that you had, and then you got some the right people around you to be in a band. But that's a great way of looking at it. The I love that you're watching American Idol or X Factor or The Voice or whatever, and you're like, these guys are missing out on the best stuff. And I know what you mean. It's like a lot of these things that we go through when we're younger. It's like, I don't want to go back to that, but I'm glad that, but still, those are some of my fondest memories. It's so I totally get that. Well, obviously, whatever you've been doing these past several years has been paying off. You were called an artist that writes like Leonard Cohen, sings like Robert Plant, and has the charisma of a cabaret performer. And that was by a New York Times writer. And NPR's been giving you some love also, saying you some comparisons to Billie Holiday and Janis Joplin and Bob Dylan. And how's it feel going from that kid who, barely started playing guitar in his, mid 20s to getting these great reviews from these huge outlets?
I feel immediately unworthy and like I'm cheating somebody. That's my initial, black hole of insecurity speaking.
Mhm.
But I mean, obviously it's flattering, and obviously that's what you aim for. You aim for people recognizing your creativity, your talent, your hard work or whatever. But it never feels real. It only feels real when it's bad. That's the tragedy of it. And I think any true artist goes through that, because there's this weird balance that you inherently have as an artist, which is the omnipotence and impotence working together. So the feeling of complete narcissism and self-worth, and I can do this, just to get on the stage and feeling you can do this, it takes, it takes something. Not everybody has that. But at the same time, so you have to recognize your grandness or whatever it is, but the crippling smallness, that you feel all the time, that you're unworthy, or you're cheating, or you're stealing, or you're it's just a matter of time before they figure you out. Or, okay, that was a success, but maybe that's an anomaly, and I'll be forgotten, and so all these things, and they work simultaneously. It's not that people sometimes think it's like a seesaw, that you have this, oh, today I'm feeling great, and yeah, I can do this. I go down to the studio with energy, and then the next day it goes down, it tilts up and down. But to me, it's just these two kind of semi-transparent filters on each other, and they coexist, and they tug and pull and push, and just, so it's so much emotional energy to deal with it. And it's no wonder to me that so many, and especially performing artists, that you travel, you're tired, you're constantly pushed to your physical limits and your emotional limits. You perform in front of 30,000 people, and then you go to sleep alone in a hotel with your family and your friends away. And so I can, I don't do drugs. I drink alcohol, but I'm not like an alcoholic. And and so I imagine people who like, Kurt Cobain, Amy Winehouse, all those people, or Joplin, or Jim Morrison, or whatever. I can really understand how people break. It's such a demanding um, endeavor, and people lose it, and even I was just watching yesterday. Jesus, I was watching yesterday. My brother is an artist. My little brother, he's a sculptor and a painter, and he's going through his own processes, and he's hating himself, and he feels like he's just bashing his wall against the canvas, his head against the canvas. And, I told him like, and he said, you're lucky, you already achieved a certain, and I said, no, I feel exactly the same. And he said, nah, you're just saying that. And I remembered I saw this YouTube of Dylan coming to record We Are the World. And I don't know if you saw this, but it's heartbreaking. It's tragic. The guy comes there and he's Dylan, voice of a generation. He's Dylan in the 80s. He already did everything.
Mhm.
And yet he comes there and he's so insecure about his voice. And he's not a singer like Michael Jackson. He's not
Right.
a like, and he's kind of out of his element, and you see it. And there's a Stevie Wonder playing the piano and Quincy Jones trying to produce him, and they're trying to push him to it. And you can see that he just he doesn't want to be there. And
Right.
I told him, look at that. That's fucking Dylan. He just like won a Nobel Prize. And
Mm.
if if even he goes through that process, then we have no choice. But it's just an inevitable, inherent, just kind of part of being an artist, is that insecurity. And I think the only thing that makes a true artist an artist is the ability and the courage to go through those moments. And that's kind of what I told you in the beginning. Like, just one step at a time. Like, every time I try to think too much forward or too much in the past, now that I get emotional, it just becomes overwhelming. And so, just, I see myself as like a blue collar worker. I go down to the studio and I pick up the guitar and I hate myself, and I go drink a beer and I go back and pick the guitar, and and it's just like, you have to do this. I think about, my grandfather as a carpenter or a builder of houses. He didn't get to bitch and whine about, I don't feel it today. Uh,
I
so
love that. I love that how that's such a unique way of looking at going into the studio like a blue collar worker, or like a like you're going, like you got your pick and your shovel and you're just gonna go in
it's
there and you're
really
just gonna
that.
work and you're gonna sweat and then you're gonna clock out and go to the bar. Like
It's really
I
that. Sorry, but like, I'm thinking about it. What's crazy about it, while we're talking about it, I realized that it's not like it used to be way easier. As I said, like, writing the first songs, it's the easiest thing in the world. You have 26 years of not writing anything that are just funneled into 1 month. But then you write another album, and then you have to challenge yourself. I don't want to write the same songs I've written before, and I want to grow as an artist, and this is boring to me, and what's my new sound, and how do I stay relevant, and like all these things. Now is way, like, it used to be the stream of consciousness kind of thing, that I just go to the studio and whatever comes out, I'm happy with it. And now it really, that when you said like a pick, and just going down to the mine, it
yeah.
really feels that way. It really feels that
Uh-huh.
way.
Yeah. So obviously you are doing, you're putting the work in, and Anagnorisis is your newest album. Tell us a little bit about that album.
First of all, I'm super, I have this coy smile every time somebody has to pronounce that album
Yeah.
title.
I had to think about it. Yeah.
Because like, I read it, I was reading, as I was reading Aristotle, as one does in his spare time. And there's a there's a book of his, a thesis called Poetics. It's about Greek drama, and I was bored one night and I had this, and so I was starting to read it, and I was interested in the morals of what art should be, blah 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 blah. But then he coins this term called, I think in Greek it would be anagnorisis, but I have no idea how to pronounce it either. Um, and so it means the moment of self-recognition due to a new piece of knowledge. So a character learns something about themselves, about their, and it changes their whole definition of identity. So, like in The Sixth Sense, when he learns that he was the ghost all along, who,
Mm.
that's kind of like a moment uh, of an agnosis. And it was a eureka moment for me, because I read this term and the way I work is, I write very eclectically. So I go down to the studio and I work, and things come out or things don't come out. 99% it's garbage, and it will never see the light of day. But slowly there's an accumulation of ideas and stuff, and they seem to be completely random. But I trust my subconsciousness that it has a plan somewhere in there. And then when I read that term, it was just, everything falling in place, that I could see the picture finally. And I realized I was 39. I knowingly was rolling slowly and, I don't know, um, ungracefully to my midlife crisis. And and I took a year off touring, which I did for the first time since those shows that we talked about, and I never stopped. And so I was like, I was burnt out. I said, I want to take a year off. I bought this property in Italy. I just want to rest a bit. I want to see who I am besides the stage. And and I was writing these songs that didn't really make sense. And suddenly it struck me that I was searching for my identity. That was the whole reason of the album. And there was this thing that the deeper I was digging, the blurrier it got.
Mm.
And I was so frustrated because it felt I was either not talented enough or not courageous enough or not patient enough or not honest enough. And how could it be that I'm not, like, me as an artist? I need to be able to define myself through my art, through my structure. And then I had this epiphany that life is chaotic, like, and trying to impose a structure on it is by default going to reach some kind of falsehood. And once I realized that all these different voices, all these apparent random voices, were just as legitimately Asaf as any one of them,
Mm.
it just struck me that this is the album. It's a mosaic of who I am, these different characters all coexisting, sometimes harmoniously, but sometimes, just aggressively, angrily at each other and contradictory to each other. And so that became the album. So Anagnorisis is used almost as in an ironic sense, because I don't believe that there is an Anagnorisis in real life. There's no one moment that you're like, oh, this is me, and I can put it in, in a mold and say, this is me, and that's who I am, because it's a nebula that's always changing, and it's mutating, and it's beautiful that way. And that's what I try to do, give that confusion the dignity that it deserves.
Right. That was your Anagnorisis right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I love, I totally agree with that. And I've had those thoughts myself, I think when we're, teenagers or something, you might be really into whatever culture it is, or a particular type of music, like you're like, this is who I am, I'm a punk rocker, or I'm a
Yeah,
surfer, and you just, and you feel so defined. And as you get older, hopefully you broaden your horizons, and for me, I love probably more music. I'm more interested in more music than I ever was, right?
yeah,
So it feels like I'm less defined, but maybe I'm more defined. Maybe it's like you said, it's like all of those voices are still part of you. It's just you've broadened your horizons. So
yeah, I agree. And it's like, when you're a teenager, you become a goth kid or a punk kid or whatever kid, because your brain is a structure machine. It needs a structure, and you need a structure because you don't know who you are, and you need to define yourself, because otherwise it gets too scary in the world or whatever. And so you need to feel part of something, and you put that mold on yourself, and that's who I am. And I think it's a courageous step, and it comes with age, to just be able to strip down those stenciled definitions of what you're supposed to be to yourself, and just kind of wing it. This is me right now, this is me right now, and this is me, and I'm full of multitudes. Fuck Dylan for releasing that song, like, like he just, I was working on the album and I was like, oh, multitudes, that's my theme now. And then he releases a song, I Contain Multitudes, and I'm like, ah, they did it again.
Yep, yep. He's still doing it.
Yeah.
Well, Asaf, it's been a real pleasure talking to you, man. It's been fun, and I feel like we got to talk about some fun things. So we'll be listening to the new album, and with new ears, knowing the story behind it. But we like to end the interview by asking if you had one piece of advice to offer aspiring artists, what would it be?
Um, don't expect miracles. I say that tragically because one should always aspire for great beauty and interest, but I don't know, life is just life. Anything that's too good to be true is always too good to be true. And enjoy the dark, muddy, gritty process of the process. I know how cliche and how, like quote Zen book or whatever it is, that you buy off the counter, but it really is. If you don't enjoy the gritty process, then just go do any other job in the world. It's
Totally.
easier.
No, I know what you mean. I mean, if you don't enjoy the process, then why are you doing it? You
Yeah,
can't be. I've talked about this with a lot of artists. If you don't like the writing or the struggle or hauling your gear or doing all that stuff, then you don't like being a musician.
yeah,
It's like that
yeah,
is
yeah,
being a musician.
yeah,
It's like it's like any profession. It's not always, it's not all the good stuff.
yeah,
Or maybe that harder stuff is the good stuff to some people, like you said, that are some of those early memories are some of your fondest, and you're sad that some people don't get to experience those. So
Bringing it backward.